What we could hear with that. There was a, this is sort of a war story session. I kind of like war stories myself, because I got lots of war stories. There was a S10 Blazer that belonged to a girl that worked up at the docks up here, and she had a radio noise. And whenever she would pull up here, and you ever heard this noise in your radio where it would go, I just love that. Outstanding, huh?
Alternator one.
That wasn't alternator, it was something else. And so what we did was, how do you determine what it is? How do you determine whether it's alternator noise or something else?
Mine was wired wrong.
Yeah. What do you think? My brother had radio noise one time when he was driving down the road, because in those days you weren't supposed to rotate radial tires crisscross, and somebody had rotated his radial tires, and the belts were whipping up static electricity and making any noise in his radio. And he found it because I was looking for connections and one other thing another, and he said, look, the spoke on this one here is bent, so I know this tire was on the other side. So when we cross-rotated his tires back like they were, all of his radio noise went away. Who's ever gonna see that? That's weird. But we see strange stuff like that. This particular one, we kill the alternator first. Listen to the static, and basically, what is the most static prone part of your radio?
Antenna.
Low end, I'm sorry, or your band, most static prone band on your radio. The low end of the AM band is super sensitive to static. So if you're trying to figure out something like this, you turn the volume up on the radio and you're doing away with stuff, because anywhere you've got a spark jumping, that's just a naked spark, you basically have radio frequency interference and your radio is going to pick it up. Right. So it's what we had on there. I noticed whenever we turned it on and it, we pull the alternator, it didn't quit. When we pulled the ignition, the instant I killed the ignition, it went away. We pulled the distributor cap off, and you know the little carbon button that rides on top of the rotor in the distributor? It had fell out of the distributor cap and was rolling around in there, so the spark was having to jump about 1/4 inch to hit the middle of the rotor, and that's where the radio noise was coming from. All we had to do is put a distributor cap on it and our radio noise was gone. Fairly simple, right? All right, so this one gal, here's another little troubleshooting thing. She's she was a student, she's a new student, didn't know very much at the time. And so she came and said, she said, my engine's locked up on my car, or the starter's wrong, bad or something. And I said, well, let's see what's going on with that. So, they managed to get it over here. And so I told her, and sure enough, when you go to turn the key, it wouldn't do anything. And so I had one of the guys that had a good muscle up arm get on the balancer with a socket, and he's trying to turn the engine by hand, which is a smart thing to do. Now the starter can cause it to lock up if it comes apart the right way and binds up in there. But on this particular one, he was able to turn it kind of slowly, and I noticed that the belt was slipping on the air conditioner pulley. So we took the belt off and it started up. That ain't real complicated, is it? But it's easy to troubleshoot it. It's easy to hear it and say that's a starter. You can get in trouble like that really quick if you're trying to troubleshoot something and say, you got a bad starter on there. And so when I was about 20 years old, I was working at a shop in Enterprise, and his older mechanic, he was at the time he was like 26, he says, and he was really a good mechanic too. He still works in Enterprise over there at a place. But anyway, he says, I said, this starter doesn't fit right on this truck. And he says, oh, shut up and get on there and put that starter on that truck. And I says, it doesn't fit right. I'm telling you, look at it. This starter don't fit right. Well, anyway, when I put it up under there, that little step that goes in that little hollow part of it that lines the starter up wouldn't go in there. And I was trying to jostle it around and put it in there and tighten it in there with bolts. And I broke an ear off the new starter because I told him, I says, look, that starter didn't fit right, and I tried to tell you that. And he told me it was my fault because I should have been smarter than to tighten the thing up and break the ear off. And he was right. But at the same time, but anyway, it's really good to be able to blame somebody else, isn't it? So, all right, now we're going to go on here. So, then there's this 97 Grand Marquis that with a wiped out rear axle. It wasn't too difficult to diagnose. The drive shaft turns, but the car doesn't move. Right? If the drive shaft turns, but the car doesn't move, you got a problem in there where the gears are, right? That ain't complicated. And we basically threw a one on that. Then we got a 2001 Explorer that came in running hot. We added 3.5 gallons of coolant mix to the radiator, and it seemed to run okay, but it was drinking water like a thirsty camel, and it had to have head gaskets. Another Explorer came in with a bad misfire and an unoperated radio, and somebody told me they connected a set of jumper cables backward and thought they'd cause a problem, but after the scope test and a rundown, all they had was a blown fuse and a tracked plug wire. You know, so you can assume a lot and get in trouble if they said somebody hooked the jumper cables up backward, and we know that they ruined something. Well, when they did that, in that particular case, they got lucky and just popped a fuse. So you didn't need to reply, you know, put an engine controller on and all that kind of junk. Then there's this 2001 Pontiac Montana. That's what we're talking about here. And it was Judy McClaney's vehicle. And she says, some customers, when you hear them talking, you just can listen to them because they're fairly reliable in telling you good data. You know what I mean? I mean, Judy has never come to me with something that wasn't legitimate. You know, some people will come and they'll, you know, complain about something that's just basically the way it was. You know, I remember there was back when I was doing all of the drivability and electronic stuff in the Ford dealer over there, there was a F-150 that was like a 92 model, and the guy would drive it down the road, and about the time he came over a hill, sometimes like a little rise in the road, it would feel like somebody ran into the back of a truck, boom, and just jerk it, crick in his neck. And so I put the portable vehicle analyzer on it, which hooked up in between the engine controller and the wire harness, and was making a recording. I mean, a really high resolution recording of that. Now this big thing was huge, and you put it in the seat, and it was part of the SBDS machine and all that. And whenever it happened, you know, it went into lean cruise mode, and the EGR was doing thing. I don't remember exactly what I saw, but I saw it when it happened, and it bam, and it made a recording of what it did. And I uploaded that recording via dial-up. That's how long ago that was. It took a long time too to forward it. When the engineer called me back, he says, "You'll never fix that." I said, "What?" He says, "That is something that's designed into that truck, and when it goes into lean cruise mode and it's checking this with, you know, if this happens to decide to come out of lean cruise mode when it's getting a little EGR, I don't remember all the details, but he says it'll do that. And it'll bang, it'll, you know, it'll jerk a crick in your neck just about." He says there's not enough of those things out there for us to write a fix on it, because it would entail replacing the engine controller, because in those days you couldn't reflash. You can reflash now, you couldn't reflash him because that was pre-OBD2, right? So anyway, well, this van had quite a few miles on it, and every now and then whenever she would go to make a turn, the traction control light would come on, like you see right there, and it would, you know, bounce under her foot. I mean, it would be a crazy feel. You'd see the traction active light, but she was barely moving. Now, when is the traction control light supposed to come on? If the traction control on this van is working right, when is it supposed to work? When you're spinning the tires in the wet grass or something, or if you're on a slick piece of pavement like in the ice, it's going to drive brake fluid pressure, which it creates, to the one that's spinning, and that forces the other one to pull, right? That's what traction control is all about. All right, that's what this was. It kind of gives you the same kind of feeling, or the same effect that you'd have if you had a limited slip differential. But it's basically using the brakes to make it happen. It's more how they came up with that. So, but anyway, the engine power is reduced first, though. That's another thing you need to remember. On most of them, even they got traction control, they think you're giving it too much gas, because somebody that's giving it too much gas is going to be spinning the right front or the right rear wheel typically. You know, and they say the car's not moving. I just need to keep giving it more gas. Well, the first thing it does, because it has some control over some things, is it limits engine power to try to do it that way. And if it's spinning keeps up, that's when it starts driving fluid over there to lock up that wheel. All right, so, but anyway, if the torque reduction is necessary, the brake control module has to ask the PCM to do that. Engine speed less than 600 RPM will delete the injector dropout strategy, which is how it limits torque. All right, so I drove the van with a freshly updated scan tool and duplicated the problem twice. The message center would inform me the traction control light was on, just like you see right here. I got a scan of the diagnostic trouble codes and revealed only one code, which was a C1295, and that defined it as a brake lamp switch circuit open. Well, why is the brake lamp switch anything that's even pertinent in this situation? Why does the electronic brake control module need to know when you're mashing the brake? Because when you're going into a wheel lock situation, it needs to see he's applying the brake, the wheels are sliding, and he just start, working on that. Because it also does that job in addition to the traction control. All right. So we go through here and we figured we're going to follow the trouble tree. That's the trouble tree that we followed right there. Isn't that cute? Did you perform the ABS diagnostic system check? Yes, no. Press the brake pedal with the scan tool, observe the brake switch status parameter in the ABS data list. All that. All right, so press the brake pedal. Are all the stop lamps off? You can see where they're going with that. Test the feed circuit of the stop lamp for open or high resistance. Refer to circuit testing and wire and repair. Test the ground circuit of the stop lamps for an open or high resistance, and so on and so forth. Now, this is what the schematic looks like on that. All right, you see this? I drew this schematic, by the way, or I actually used paint to cobble it together so you can see what's going on here. You notice what we got right here, we've got the brake switch input to the electronic brake control module. All right, step 6 of this particular trouble tree that I just showed you, led us, which is test the ground circuit of the stop lamps for an open or high resistance. Refer to circuit testing and wiring repairs. Now, whenever you look at the brake switch input, you notice on this particular one, it's actually looking for voltage, right? Now, a lot of these electronic boxes aren't looking for voltage. They're looking for a ground coming through the stop lamps. And this one here doesn't appear to operate that way, at least from the schematic that was in the shop manual. And so what we did was, back there at the one side, well, we saw this particular connector. Now, what do you see wrong with that connector right there? What bothers you about that?
Prong missing.
Somebody had spread that one out pretty bad. The one in the middle. So he said, well, it looks like we got a problem right there. That could, the top center cavity happened to be the ground connection for the right stop lamp. And after we tweaked to the terminal, we decided to replace the connector shell in the terminal. Sometimes you have to do that. I will tell you that those things can be dadgum pricey though if you get them out of that flip chart I got in there. We bought everybody kept working on the power windows on the GMC out there until I had to buy one of those connector shells for the power window switches on the GMC. It was $90, that little connector shell. Just blow you away how much they want to charge for that. But the thing about it is, we bought there was a guy, and this is an integrity lesson right here. There was a Mustang that came in there one time we were working on when I was training this guy. And the particular car had a alternator connector that was messed up somehow. I don't know what happened to it, but somehow it was messed up. The car was out of warranty, and we said the only way, from what Parks is telling us, and I don't know if they were full of mud or what, that we can get that connector shell at that particular time, was before the flip chart days, is replacing the entire wire harness. He says, well, this is my car, I like it, my baby, I want it right, so order me the wire harness. $275 for a wire harness. And this wire harness goes all over the place under the hood. I mean, it was a bear. So we get the wire harness out of the box, and my apprentice is looking at the wire harness, and he's found this connector on the wire harness, and he's looking at the car, and he said, this is right in the middle on the top. Why don't we just cut the harness connector off of this one and solder it on that one? What's wrong with that? Anybody see a problem with that? Anybody awake? What's right? The guy paid $275 for a wiring harness, and he was willing to pay us 4 hours labor to put it on there, which is what what it paid to do that. So we put the wire harness on there. He got the whole harness, and it was routed the right way and all that kind of stuff. 2 years after I came to work here, I went over there, and that same guy he's a big heavy set guy, and he had a little plumber's butt issue, except he wore these pants that was pulled up pretty high, and he had the waistband on his underwear said, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, because he knew. Anyway, he was under there standing on his head up under a truck putting a wire harness in. And I said, so you're putting another wire harness in? He says, yeah, I could have cut the connector off and put it on there, but I remembered what you taught me on the Mustang. The guy pays for a wire harness, but a lot of guys will just solder it on there and clean things up and try to make, I think they put the whole harness on there when they really didn't, you know. Of course, then when you get burned is when he says, I want my old harness. Seriously? I mean, see what I'm saying? You don't want to find yourself in that set of circumstances. Always do it right. That's the whole thing. Well, anyway, we dug into that, ordered a replacement board to start with. You know, the lights have got a board, and I think I still got them boards in there that this thing plugs into. We put the board on there, we put the connector on there, and we got that up. It wasn't really all that expensive really on this particular one because we were able to get it without, you know, paying $90 for it or whatever. But had we fixed the traction control problem, we followed our chart, we replaced this and the board, the traction control problem was still there. Okay, so here we go. So next thing you know, we booted it up and rechecked it after the next couple of times it happened on her, and it was happening more frequently. We got a C1226, which is a right front excessive wheel speed variation. What do you think about that? Where had that code been the first time around? Heck, I don't know. But what we found out when we did our test on it was that. Who sees the problem there? We were going about 2 or 3 miles an hour when we took this picture. What are you seeing?
The right one's going 20.
Right one's going 21 miles an hour, the left one's just going 2. You think that may have had something to do? Now see, we had applied the brake right there, and we were slowing down, but it still was throwing us that right there. And so that one was built into the hub, and so we replaced the bearing on that particular side on the right front, and she never had that problem again. She took care of that. We got that odd reading and all that kind of thing. But anyway, she understood that situation a whole lot more. Now, traction control can cause you a problem sometimes. Police officers don't like traction control on their cars because of, you know, sometimes it causes them issues whenever they're trying to, you know, take off, I guess, on high-speed pursuit or something. So a lot of the times you would have traction control totally disabled on police cars and stuff like that. So, I mean, but you guys can tell me about traction control, right? If I give you a verbal example about traction control systems, what's it about? What is it? What's it there for? I just told you a minute ago.
It sends brake fluid to
Make the
the.
tires feel the same speed.
It applies the brake on the wheel that's spinning.
Exactly, that's what we needed to hear. And like I say, it detorques it first though, remember? And that right behind you over there somewhere, there's an auto body that came off of a Lexus down there, maybe on the bottom. Come off of a Lexus SC300.
Is that the one you trashed?
Huh?
Is that the one that you wrecked?
No, it's this one here, that was an LS400.
Oh.
Anyway, that particular one's got 2 throttle plates. It's got a throttle plate above the other throttle plate. That's it. See that? That's off an SC300. Now the reason I wound up with that one is the guy brought that SC300 in there, and here's a little short addendum to the war story thing because I got a minute or two. And this is one I usually do when we're in engine performance stuff. But the guy had this SC300. It's a beautiful little Lexus car, if you like Lexuses, you know. And but it ran terrible and was misting gas out the exhaust. And he was this guy was we did quite a bit of work on his family's vehicles and all that kind of stuff. He was a young guy, and he said, "I have spent $4,000 trying to get this car fixed," and that was one of the parts that was changed. And he had been buying junk parts, just throwing them at it, trying to make it quit blowing a gasoline mist out the exhaust pipe. And I said, well, whenever somebody has already gone to this length, I like to take every precaution I can not to change anything until I find out for absolute certain what's wrong. You know what I mean? We're not going to spend any of your money until we know what's wrong. Okay, so what we did was we connected the fuel pressure gauge to it. We had to use a special adapter to do that. They didn't give us a fuel pressure tap. All right, so I noticed whenever we turned on the key, the fuel pressure would go up to 40 pounds. And then it would bleed off really fast. Well, that's a red flag. It's not supposed to do that. When you pressure up the fuel system, it's supposed to stay up there. Okay, so the next thing I said, why don't we disconnect the fuel pump and pressure up the fuel system with air? 40 pounds of air pressure. We can use our cylinder leakage tester to do that. So we adapted it over here, took the fuel filter out of the loop, pressured the fuel system up with air. Now be careful and hear this, because I've never heard of anybody else doing it before. I mean, I'm always a think outside the box kind of a guy. I got that from my dad, I guess. So we pressured it up with air, and lo and behold, I hear air coming out in the intake. Well, not too hard to figure out that that's probably going through an injector, right? But why is it going through an injector? Is that injector mechanically bad? Is it electrically open? So how am I going to determine that? I'm hearing the noise. I got it 40 pounds of air pressure, which is good because I'm not squirting gas in there like a fire hose and, you know, making the fin in the oil, you know, filling the cylinder up with gas and all that kind of stuff. Because if a cylinder fills up with enough gas and you spin the engine over, you can actually top out on that liquid gas and bust something, which is not a good plan, right? But we're just squirting air in there, but I'm hearing it. So how am I going to determine what's going on? How am I going to determine why that injector is open? And which injector is open is important, isn't it? Okay, somebody give me an idea. I want you guys to be thinking now.
Use an injector pulse tester.
Well, maybe, but let's do something a little easier first. What we're going to do is we're going to gain access to the injectors, and we're going to unplug them one at a time until that hissing noise goes away, or at least see if it goes away. If I unplug all the injectors and the hissing noise doesn't go away, then one of the injectors is trash. It's just wide open. But what's just so happened, I think it was number 3 or maybe number 4, when we unplugged the wire from it, the hissing stopped. All right, now what do I know? 2 possibilities. On an injector, on just about every vehicle out there, the injector has got power hot wired to it, and the engine controller goes with the ground, right? You got that? On everything except a 87 to 90 Jeep Cherokee, and it's hardwired to ground and pulses the power, which is that weird Bendix fuel injection that came from wherever. But anyway, this particular one, when I pulled that out and I found out number 4 had that, I says, okay, so I'm going to check. Oh, look, the one that's supposed to be pulsing is grounded all the time. Give me a possibility. What can cause that?
Something wear through, like a metal part touching something.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe scratching across a bracket or something like that, or maybe pinched somewhere where somebody had changed one of those other parts and all that kind of stuff.
Or maybe the connector, the terminals punch through, or
Something like that, or you're touching each other, you know, there's all kinds of
or a
possibilities.
carbon trace maybe from
Okay,
gas.
so how are you gonna figure that out? This is a pretty heavy, this is carrying enough current to operate that injector. You gotta find that now. You're closing in on the problem, but you gotta determine what it is that actually needs to be done to surgically repair that vehicle. It's not enough to say, yep, you got some fuel going in there through an injector.
Do you go through the ground wire with one of those pinchy things and then use a test light and see where?
Let's do the first thing, let's do the easy part first. I'm lazy enough to where I'm gonna try to do what's easy first, right? I mean, I didn't used to be. Used to, I was not as smart as I am now, but I was gonna say, okay, I'm gonna check this by unplugging the engine controller. If I unplug the engine controller and this problem goes away, what do I know now?
Bad engine controller.
Bad engine controller. If I unplug the engine controller and it's still there, you got it wire shorted to ground, right? Got that? Okay, so here's where we wound up. We unplugged the engine controller, problem went away. I jerked the engine controller out, because it's $1,700 if you buy one from Lexus. Anything you buy from Lexus. A power steering hose for that same car was $450. That's another story entirely. I have time. That particular car, well, we fixed that. We got the power steering, we got the engine controller off. We sent it to A1 Cardone. They rebuilt it because we told them what it was wrong with it. They replaced the driver that was shorted, brought it back. Car ran like a brand new car. Ooh, all the gas went away. We changed the oil because of the gasoline, you know, that had contaminated the oil and all that. And he was just really, really happy with that car. It ran so smooth. But anyway, he comes back later and he goes, I've got a power steering leak. Well, this power steering leak, I pull this line off, and it's sort of a convoluted thing. It goes here, there, and yonder. And I said, okay, well, I know when I checked the price on it, and they said it was $450 for a power steering line, I said, you are gotta be kidding me. And so he called this Lexus graveyard up there somewhere between here and Montgomery, and they told him it was $150 for a used power steering line. And so I said, why don't we just send this one over to Sam at the parts store, and he can actually, you know, put new rubber on this, you know, cut the metal parts off and put new rubber on it, because he's got a, you know, machine to crimp all that and everything like that. Well, Sam calls me back, and actually his little thing used ferrules, you know, which is the little thing that looks like a ring that goes on your finger, except it's on that line. He says, my ferrules won't fit this line. He said, we tried to grind them down so it would fit. What? Wait a minute, you're grinding and you're gonna put a ferrule on there, expect that to seal? Send that stuff back to me, Sam. I don't need you grinding on this line. Well, it turned out the line was an 11 millimeter line, and everybody else's line is a 10 millimeter. Why in the Sam Hill did they go up 1 silly millimeter? So it's pretty beefy metal. So I'm talking about the steel part of the line. So I take the line, I put it in the vise, and I use some of my crocus cloth, and I crocus cloth that sucker down to where that 10 millimeter ferrule will go on it. And I built him a power steering line. And Sam felt so bad about, you know, messing things up. He just said, I'll just give you the rubber parts and all that, you know. And so he didn't even charge us for it. I think I got out of here for a $5 basic charge. But the thing about it is, why in a Sam Hill does somebody go up 1 millimeter bigger with the line and then make it so expensive nobody can afford to buy it?
Does that car require more pressure, like, or something?
No, I mean, you could.
It's just so you have to go for it.
Well, I mean, that's-
Yeah, it's a Lexus. They wanted you to buy the part. I mean, basically, that was a funny little thing about that. But anyway, that car is I hadn't seen that car in a long time, but that's the end of that.